Okay, what's up? We're back. And we're going to start the inventory series now. I'm currently in the project that I made to do the Interact system, and we're going to be using the Interact system as a base for the inventory. So if you haven't checked out the Interact system, maybe do that one first because we're going to need that to be able to interact with the items. If you have your own Interact system, that's fine. You can just incorporate whatever you have into this, as long as you can pick an item up or select an item or however you want to do it, that's fine. Going through this inventory, I will be using my Interact system, so anything that comes to interactions, if you're not using mine, then just integrate what you have into that. So I'm just going to go into my folder here. I got a folder that I made last time called My Stuff, and that's got my Interact in it. I'm going to make a new folder here and just call this inventory. And then everything we do inventory wise, we're going to put inside this folder. So I think for this first video, we're just going to set up our items. And I have already gone ahead and downloaded some items. So I have I have a static mesh for a bread here with some textures, material, and I made a icon too. So we're going to need an icon. And all that is just a PNG that I made in Photoshop. But we just need something to use for an icon. So I have a bread item here. I just downloaded this ham here. So I did the same thing. I got the static mesh, the icon, and I downloaded a water. And this is just so I can have some items to test here. So just have some static meshes in your project here that we can test it on. So inside this inventory item, I'm going to start by making a new blueprint class, and I'm going to go down here to all classes, and I'm going to select object. This is going to be what our inventory items are going to be based from. So objects you can't spawn in the world, but they can hold data. So we're going to be using the object class to hold the data for all of our inventory items. And I'm going to call that the BP base item. And then we're going to make another blueprint class in here. This one's going to be an actor. So this will be whenever we want to place or spawn an item that we can pick up in inventory in the world. So this one I'm going to call the BP world item. So let's jump into this BP base item here. And you can see in the top, it says parent classes object. So we're going to add variables to this. And this is going to be whatever variables we want our items to have. So for instance, the first one I'm going to make in here is going to be a mesh, because we want all of our items to have a mesh. If we kick something out into the world, if we spawn it, it needs to have a mesh to use. So I'm going to give this a variable called mesh, and we're going to make it of the type static mesh. And that's going to be an object reference. And then we're going to need a thumbnail. And then we're going to make this of the type texture 2D. Object reference. And then these items are all going to be stackable. So we're going to make a stack size. And then we're just going to make that an integer. Next one is going to be the interact text. And that's going to be of the type text. This is going to be for when we're picking the items up. This will kind of dynamically change the widget to say whatever we want it to say. Next one's going to be a display name. That's going to be of the type name, and this is going to be what it's going to show in our inventory. So I'm going to compile and save that, and then I'm going to jump back to the folder. So inside this inventory folder, I'm just going to make a folder called items, and I'm just going to throw this BP base item and BP world item inside that folder. I'm going to add an enum to this. So we're going to go to blueprints, and we're going to go to enumeration, and I'm just going to name this E underscore inventory use, something like that. And then I'm just going to open this up really quick. And in here, we can use this for when we actually use the item. So for this, I'm just going to add 3 values in here. And the first one I'm just going to put is, we're just going to say default. And then I'm just going to do, for this example, I'm just going to name one food and one water, because that's what I have for items. So again, we're going to use this later on, but I'm just going to set this up. And if you think that you might want to change this, that's fine. You can set these to whatever you want. I'm just going to make some default uses for food, water, and then one for default or none, anything like that. And then I'm going to add this to our base item. So I'm back in the BP base item. We're going to add a new variable. I'm going to call it use. And then this type is going to be use, and we should see our enum here, inventory use. Okay, so I'm going to compile and save that. Then I'm going to jump back into the folder, back into items, and we're going to open up the world item now. Now, again, this world item is going to become any inventory item we have. So we're only going to need this one item to spawn whatever inventory items that we want to place in the world or spawn in the world. So we're going to add a couple things to this. We're going to have to set this up here. So I'm going to add some variables to it. First one we're going to want to add is our BP base item that we made. And we're going to make that of the type BP base item. And we want to make sure that we pick a class reference on this. And then I'm going to add one called quantity. And we're going to make that a integer. And then I'm going to make one should despawn. And we're going to make that a Boolean. Okay, now I'm going to set this up kind of the same way that I did for my base interact item. So before we do, what I want to do is go into the construction script, because this will run when you compile the blueprint, and it'll run before the game starts, which is going to be what we want to do here. So we're going to add a static mesh. So we're going to come up here and just add static mesh. I'm going to go into the collision, make sure static mesh is selected, go into collision presets. I'm going to change this to custom. And I just want to make sure collision is enabled. I'm going to do ignore all, and then I'm just going to block the interact channel, and I'm going to block world static. Because we might be spawning this in the world, I want to make sure it's going to hit the ground, so that's why we're blocking world static. And my interact system uses the interact trace channel. So I need to just block those two. We can change this per item if we need, or when we're spawning the item. So this is just going to be kind of a default to go by here. And while we're here, let's just add a widget to this as well. So you can name that whatever you want. If you want, you can call it the interact widget or something. I'm just going to leave mine widget. I'm going to select it, and then we're going to go up. And we're going to change the space from world to screen. And then under widget class, I'm going to pick the interact widget that I made for my interact system. And again, if you want to use a different interact system, go ahead. You don't have to do anything that I'm going to do for interactions. You can do your own. But for me, I'm going to build this from my interact system. So then I'm going to come down to visibility, and I'm going to uncheck visible, because we don't want that to be visible all the time. We only want it to be visible when we're highlighting the item here. So with those things set up, I'm going to get the static mesh, drag that out, and I'm going to set static mesh. And you'll see the function come up here. So we're going to plug that in, and then where it asks us for our static mesh now, we're going to grab our BP base item, drag that in. I'm going to drag off and get defaults. And then you can see this is all the stuff that we set up in our BP base item. And you can add whatever else you want here. These are all the things that we're just going to need for every item. So as this whole thing progresses, you might start realizing that you need to add more things for however your game's going to work. Maybe you want more uses, or so we might even add more stuff in here as this goes on too. But for now, this is what we're going to do. So we can just plug our mesh into here, and then we can click on the class default, hide unconnected. So then what we're telling it to do is whenever the blueprint gets compiled, we're going to use whatever mesh is in the BP base item to set the static mesh here. So that's going to be how we can turn this one actor into whatever item we want. We're basically setting a BP base item. Every time that we throw this world item into the world, we're going to be basically setting a BP base item. And then that BP base item is going to have its own set of characteristics to it. And one of them is going to be the mesh, which we're setting there. So now if we go in the event graph here, what we're going to do is cast to this widget here. So anytime this world item is in our world, it's going to have our widget on there. So they're both going to always be loaded into memory at the same time. So I'm going to cast to it so that we can change the information in there or do anything else that we may want to do. So I'm going to drag off that widget component and get user widget object, and then we can cast from here. So I'm going to cast to WBP interact, and that was the name of the widget that we made for the interact system. And then coming off that cast, I'm going to promote this return pin to a variable, just so we have that there. And then I'm going to put a branch coming off here. And the condition for the branch is going to be our should despawn. So I'm going to plug that in here. I'm going to do a set timer by function name here. And then I'm just going to make a custom event and call this despawn. Okay, and then for the despawn, all I'm going to do is destroy actor. And then I'm just going to copy that function name. We're going to paste it in here. Just for tests, I'm going to set this to be 10 seconds. So we'll be able to set what items we want to despawn and what items we don't. So if you're placing items around the world for the character to pick up, maybe you don't want those to despawn, but maybe if the player can't hold a certain amount of inventory and the extra items get kicked out of inventory, anything like that, you might want them to despawn. We're just going to set this up like this. So for test, I'm going to set it up to 10 seconds, then we'll change that after. So anything that has despawn set to true will despawn in the timer we set here. And that reminds me, we also want to go to our BP base item. We're going to make that instance editable, exposed on spawn. And we're going to do the same thing for our quantity, instance editable, exposed on spawn. And we're going to do the same thing for the should despawn. And you'll see why we're doing all this. So with those set, let's set up our highlight now. So I'm going to put this world item on my interact blueprint interface. So I'm going to go to class settings, implemented interfaces, and we're going to add the interact interface that we made last time, BPI interact. And then now I have highlight, pickup, and interact in here. So I'm going to double click the highlight and I'm going to drag off that highlight function, put a branch, and then connect can interact to the condition. And then I'm going to grab this static mesh. We're going to drag up and do set overlay material, connect up our true, and I'm going to copy this, paste it down here, connect up our false, connect the static mesh to the target, and then we're going to pick the overlay material here, which I called mine highlight. So there's my highlight material we made in the interact system. Now I'm going to grab the reference that we got from the cast. We're going to drag that out, and then I'm going to drag off that and get interact text. And that was the name of the text that I made in the widget. So then we're going to drag off that and do a set text. And we're going to pick the text down the bottom here, set text text. I'm going to grab this BP base item out again. We're going to drag off and get defaults. And then I'm going to connect the interact text we made and plug that into there and then hide unconnected. So it's going to use whatever we put in that class default as a interact text. So every item can have a different interact text, or you can have certain items that are kind of grouped together that may say certain things. But whatever you put in that interact text, our widget is going to display that. And then we're going to grab the widget component, drag off and do set visibility. We're going to copy that visibility, paste another one, connect up the widget to the target, and make sure the top one is checked to be visible. The bottom one is not visible. So there is our highlight function done. And then I'm going to take the pickup pressed in here too, because these items we're going to be picking up. So again, this is coming from my interact. And for now, I'm just going to drag off this and do destroy actor, just so we know that we're picking it up, just to simulate it being picked up. We have to add inventory functions to be able to add that, and we're going to do that in the next video or so. But for now, I'm just going to do event pickup pressed, and we're going to do destroy actor. And now we're going to make a couple of items in here. So I'm just going to save everything here. So now in the inventory folder, in the items folder, I'm actually going to make another folder called items. And this is going to be where we're going to put the items that we can pick up here. So I'm going to make a child of this base item, this BP base item. I'm going to make a child of that. I'm going to make one of these for the 3 items I have. So I have a water bottle. So I'm going to make BP water, and then I'm just going to duplicate that. And we have a bread that we can make, and then I'll duplicate it again. And we have a ham. So you can use whatever you want. If you just want to use cubes and spheres or something like that, if you don't feel like downloading anything, that's fine. But I went ahead and downloaded bread, a ham, and a water. So I'm going to throw these into the items folder now. I'm going to go in there and then we're going to set these up. So now I'm going to open up my bread. And then all we're going to do is just populate this list here with whatever we want. This is going to come from the BP base item. So you can see the parent class up here. So this is our object class. So this is just going to hold the data for us. So when it asks for mesh, I'm just going to look for my bread. In the thumbnail, we're going to look for the bread thumbnail. And then where it says stack size here, you can put this to whatever you want. For testing here, I'm just going to tell it that I want my bread stack size to be 5. And actually, one thing I want to do real quick is go back into that base item. It's actually 2 things I want to do here. So in the BP base item, what I want to do is just go to this stack size integer, and by default, I want to just put that to 1. Because we're never going to stack anything to 0. Everything's going to be at least 1. So I just want to make sure that every item that's going to get set to be 1. And I'm going to make sure that the UC num I made is just set to default. It should be if you set it up like how I set mine up. But so that was one thing I want to do. The other thing I want to do is in the world item, I want to come into this BP base item variable we made, and I want to set that to default to be BP base item. Right now it's set to none. So I want to set that to default to be BP base item. And the quantity here, I also want to set this quantity to 1. Because if we're spawning something in the world, then we need to have at least 1 quantity of it. So we're going to do that. And then I'm going to jump back to my bread. So we can set whatever stack size we want for whatever item. I'm just going to set this one to be 5 for now. The interact text can say whatever you want. I'm just going to leave mine to say something like F2 pick up bread or something. You can set that to whatever you want. Display name is going to be what it's going to show in inventory. So I'm just going to say bread. And then the use item, I can give that the use of food. So this item is set up and ready to go. So I'm just going to do the same thing for the other 2 items here. Okay, so just set the ham up. And this one for test, I'm just giving a max stack size of 3 so we can try that. So my water I'm setting up to be a max stack size of 1, again, just so I can test different stack sizes here. And we should be done here setting up our items. So now if I jump into my world here, so when I started this project, I included the starter content. So I'm actually just going to go into the starter content here because there's a table I can use, and I'm just going to drag this table out. So Control and Space will open this small window here. Go into my stuff, go into inventory, go into items, and I'm going to drag out that BP world item here. So this is going to be the item that we're going to spawn in the world. So you can see when we drag it out, we have nothing. There's just a billboard there. But now with that world item selected, if we go into our details panel and we look at our BP base item, we have a drop down list here. So now I can click my bread, turn that into bread. I can click the ham or the water. So I'm going to make that my bread. So now we have a couple breads in the world here, and each one is going to give me 2 when I pick it up. And then we can either drag out another world item or we can just copy one of those. So this is going to be my water, and I'm going to just throw a couple of these in. I'm going to leave these set to quantity 1. These are set to quantity 2, and then I'll put a couple ham in here too. And I'll just set those to be quantity of 2. So this is just for testing here. So let's see if we can jump in and interact with these. And my character cannot get close to this table. So we can interact with it. It's saying press F to pick up water. They're highlighting. Press F to pick up bread. They're highlighting. So everything is working. This is as close to the table as I can get. So I'm just going to fix that. Now we can get up to our table. So now we can highlight our items. And if we press F to pick up, it's going to simulate a pickup. It's going to make them disappear. So then the one last thing I want to try here is let's just go to the water bottles. I'm just going to select these 3 and I'm going to check should despawn. So I have this set up by default to despawn in 10 seconds. So we'll just see if those are going to disappear, and they do. So our items are going to disappear. So before I forget, I'm going to uncheck that because we're going to want these to stay out so we can test them. And then I'm going to go back into the world item, because now that I know that that's working, I'm going to set this to be a despawn time I want. So let's say something like 2 minutes, 120 seconds. So then we should have our items set up. For now, this is a good way to start. We're set up. We have our BP base item set. We have our world items set. And we have a few items already made that we can interact with. And we're not going to have to do anything like this again. This one world item is going to be the only world item that we're going to have in our game. And this will just turn into whatever base item we want it to be. So I think that's going to be it for now. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.